Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Construction Industry How to Use Your Data webinar. It's presented by Dean Dorton. My name is John Godey. I'm manager on the Data Process Optimization team. I'll be working with my partner in crime, Ed McGillis. He's also a manager on the Data Process team. So thanks for joining us this afternoon. Couple things before we talk about our objectives. Just want to call out a couple things. If you have any questions today throughout the webinar, we please encourage you to drop those into the chat or the Q&A feature that's in Teams. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll be sure to get those questions answered for you if we can during the presentation. If not, we will follow up with those via an email later this week if we aren't able to get those addressed during the webinar. Another note, the webinar is being recorded, and this will be emailed out to you by the end of this week. So thank you very much. Thanks for taking time out of your day to spend with us on this particular topic. So now kind of shifting over to our objectives. So you're in for a treat. We have a song and dance portion for today's webinar. The song will be me. I'll be doing points 1 and 2. We're talking over some things in the construction industry, really talking about some general pain points that are within the construction industry as far as the data sources and managing that kind of information. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals of optimizing your data. So once we have some data, what are some of the things that we look at when we're trying to do optimization? What are the outcomes that we're after there? And then kind of 3 and 4, we start, or number 3, we start really going into the dance portion, which Ed will show you the 2-step there on PowerBI. How to use that to leverage some of the data sources and bring that into a space that's real usable for you. And then we'll have show you some next steps on how we can grow this vision and work with you to move forward on this stuff. We're going to kind of kick things off with a polling question. So this will be a Teams poll question that comes up. And then Judy, if you don't mind, will you go ahead and put that question out there for us? And you'll notice in the bottom right corner, it'll pop up here. This is how important is accurate data to the success of your organization. If you'll kind of click those options there and then show us that information, it'd be great. There we go. So we got a pretty good split here. After you submit your answer, you'll start to see the tabulations that are coming in there. So pretty wide split there. Pretty wide split. So that's interesting. Thanks for taking the time to fill those out. Appreciate it.
At least everybody's had time to think about it. Nobody selected that options.
That is good.
You're in the right place.
So if you're like me, you like to sleep. When you're trying to sleep, though, a lot of things will run through your head, so you end up kind of counting sheep. So we thought we'd do a play on that with what are the kinds of sheep that kind of jump around in your mind when you're trying to rest at night related to your business, your construction world. We try to call out some common ones here, things to think about. I'll talk just for a few minutes about some of these, and hopefully they'll probably ring true with you and some of the things that you struggle with or the things that you deal with on a regular basis in your organization. One is equipment control. So in the construction industry, you can end up having single pieces of equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, very expensive. Obviously, we want to make sure we're keeping track of where those things are at, and we want to make sure that it's easy for us to know where that thing is scheduled to be, right? So if it's being used on one job, when's it supposed to move to the next job, and understanding that with a piece of equipment like that and the impact it has on the project outcome, that becomes very important. So that may or may not be something you think about or concerned about. Also, how's that being tracked? How do I keep track of where that's at? Trying to manage that piece of information. Another big one that we've seen really over the last several years with all the different things our nations went through is the reduced kind of labor force, right? So finding the right people to do the right jobs has been difficult in many industries, and I'm sure that your teams have felt some of that sting. So competition for good resources is real. How's that looking for you? Is that something that you're struggling with? Are you able to kind of keep the projects going forward with the staff and be able to find the right people to help you out when you need them? That can be something that can be something that keeps me awake at night. Another area is real-time project status. So if at any given time, are you able to kind of look and figure out how are my projects doing? So I've got these big jobs that are running, these big construction projects. Is it pretty easy for you to understand where those things are at in terms of maybe schedule, in terms of budget? Do things look okay? Is it running in a on schedule, on budget? How does that look for you? Is that a thing that keeps you up at night trying to get your hands on that information? Maybe you can figure it out, but maybe it takes a while to figure it out and understand where that's at.
Also, where
Another-
our demo, our dance portion of the webinar will be coming in the second half. We'll mostly focus on that and talk about how that can come together. That's one of those quick wins that an organization can put in place to start getting some data around that, helping to make some decisions around that job, even bid management process.
Yeah, absolutely. Good call out, Ed. Thanks. The another area with with construction projects, maybe more so than some other industries, the amount of teams that you have working together to kind of get to your end result. There's a lot of different moving pieces there, and so is collaboration and maybe cohesion, is that difficult? Is that something that keeps you up at night, being able to get all the information that needs to be shared to the sales team, the delivery team, the construction teams that are putting the pieces together for you, trying to get all that information into a place that everyone can get to it that needs to have access to it, so that they're not kind of duplicating and repeating efforts there, keeping them all on the same page. And then a final area that I'll call out is really kind of building material, like the pricing of things, and then also your supply chains. So supply chains took a big hit. The last several years, we've seen delays on different pieces. So depending on the type of construction that you're doing, that can obviously have significant impact on your ability to deliver on your projects. So when things aren't arriving on time, that just slows everything down. And that really can drive all kinds of issues downstream for you, and impact all parts of your business. And then also pricing impacts too. So as like the price of lumber or the price of fuel changes, what's that really doing to my project profitability? How's that impacting the outcomes for your projects? Those may all be big points, pain points that are alarming, maybe keeping you up at night. And two, as we're kind of going through here, when we have these slides up like this that have these points on here, if you have other items that you can think of, just drop them into the chat. We'd love to get some of your feedback on different areas that you're thinking of, or the next one is going to talk a little bit about data sources that you have within your organization. So you can drop some other sources in here. This is when we think about those sheep, we're going to try to quiet down the sheep and get them to rest. How do we get them to bed? Well, many of those sheep that we saw before, you can start to lay them to rest a little bit if you have access to the right data when you need it. So when we start to look at some of these data sources, we kind of split them out here, kind of internal versus external. But these are probably all things that are familiar to you and how you're kind of managing your business today. And so some of the examples, internal things, so ERP systems, right? You're going to have your enterprise resource planning, accounting, financials. You may have an HR system, just keeping track of your people, your PTO. Those things may all be integrated. They may not be. Things like bid history. So as you've done over the years, you try to win business and you have a history of all those bids. So having a place where we're capturing all that bid history may be one of the buckets of data that we have. And even when we start to think and shift to thinking about outside data sources, so over to the right side, thinking of maybe contractors and bank information. So if you're in the construction industry, you may be dealing with like lien waivers and those type of processes to get and work with your contractors and your bank. And keeping track of that information may be a completely separate set of data that you need to organize and manage as you're working through the delivery of your projects to make sure that you can keep moving forward. Depending on the type of work that your construction group does, you may be working with the government. So maybe local state agencies or even federal agencies, where you may be in RFP processes with them, or if you've won RFP work from the government, you may be receiving information from them related to project milestones or progress payments that they're supposed to be making to you. Those are all things that may be impacting you from the external that could be bringing in to your set of data that you're looking at when you're looking at your overall construction world. Another area is associations. So there are a variety of different construction management associations, depending on the specific areas that you specialize in within construction. And those associations can sometimes supply industry data. So I can have performance benchmarks about other companies that maybe are of the same size as my organization, or they do the same type of work. That can be something that can be helpful to pull into my set of data that I have around construction to help with understanding how I'm doing, or how I'm comparing against other like-minded, like-focused companies within the industry. One not to be left out is for sure weather, especially in the construction world. So depending on the weather, that can just put the brakes on everything. A lot of rain can really slow down certain parts of the construction process, and you can't, it's just work stoppage. So having a history of that, or having quick access to that can be real important for you. And a final area we'll touch on here is, think of the fuel. So depending on the size of your organization, you may have fleet cars or some fuel management systems that help to manage the consumption of fuel for your fleet of automobiles that supports your team. So you may have a data set that's coming in related to that to start tracking on fuel expenses and fuel consumption. So that may be another data point that is of interest for your team. So those are, lots of different areas. Any other kind of data sources, throw them into the Q&A or in the chat. I'd love to hear any things that you deal with that aren't on this list. Be interesting to see that. So thinking about these data sources, so we have all this data. What's it really start to mean to optimize this data? So I'll talk about a few general areas about optimization. So one is, if all of these things that we've identified here are kind of in separate buckets, it really can become hard to bring all those things together. So one of the areas of optimization is bringing this stuff into a place where it's easy to get to, a one-stop place where I can see all this information. So I can see information about my projects. I can see the fuel consumption that ties into my projects. I can have all that information really in a place that's easy to get to in a single location, so that as a person who needs to make decisions and consume that data, I don't have to jump from place to place, and I can quickly find the information that I'm looking for. Kind of hand in hand with bringing things into a single location is really getting the data in a format to where it can be used together. So as we have, if you have a kind of organizational wide ERP system that has everything in one system that's all integrated, those things will all be related together. But when we start to talk about, maybe if you have different systems that perform different functions within your organization, so maybe you have your financial tool, your financial software, maybe you have your project management software, which is maybe not tightly integrated. And then you also have information that comes in from outside contractors, or maybe if you are doing work with the government, you have information coming in related to the work that you're doing for them. So the ability to tie that data together becomes real important to make sure that when I'm looking at my project, I can still see all the information from these other data sources that are related to the projects, even if I don't own that data. And that's really kind of the massaging of that data to get it ready to go to where we can use it. And then once I've defined and kind of put in place those relationships and those things that tie the data together, there's a variety of tools and ways that you can then start to look at that data into a consolidated view. So I can see all that information presented in a meaningful manner with KPIs that show performance across all of those data sets. Another area related to optimization can be consumption of this information. So if we have all this information in a place where people can see it, sometimes the distribution of that information can be cumbersome. So if you find yourself kind of emailing things out externally or internally, pulling down data, massaging it, and then putting it into a report and sending it out via email, sometimes that's an easy area of optimization and time savings for the data that you have, just making the data work a little bit harder for you instead of having you work so hard to get the data to do what you need it to do. Another great example of optimization is, I'll kind of jump back to bid history. So I mentioned that earlier on as one of our data sources. So bid history is helpful, so I can see, all these jobs that I bid. Where, in my experience, it becomes really valuable is when I can use that bid history then to help me work on current bids, right? So I can look for similar projects, maybe of the same size, the same materials, the same area of the country, the same kind of customers. I can look at that bid history and then look at the information related to those bids to see how that compares against what I'm putting together maybe for my current bids. So it becomes a tool to let me see, how did I do in the past? Did I win these jobs? Did I lose these jobs? What were the kind of key performance metrics inside that bid? So maybe it's some type of units per hour or whatever the KPI is that you're using to manage or measure the inputs to your bids. You can use those for comparison for your new bids. So that's really kind of taking a step forward and optimizing that data that you've collected to make it work harder for you. Let's see, I don't see any questions coming in there. So kind of with that, that's data. So a lot of different data sources there, a lot of words talking about those things. When we talk about data, what usually is there supporting that or helping with it is a business process. So business processes typically, they're going to be used to shape how data gets collected, how it's managed, how it's shared, how it's analyzed. All those things will support the data, so our data processes. And so I have a quick polling question here for you related to business processes. So Judy, kind of throw that up there for me. Thank you. So how would you rate your business processes? Manual, repetitive, very time consuming. We excel at email. We generate some reports and send them out. We're collaborating and we're improving, or everything's fully integrated and automated. That's where I wish I was.
That's where we'll get you, John. Don't worry.
We excel at email. Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, that's great. So it looks like email is the winner so far. And then, but at least we don't have anyone who's manual, repetitive, and very time consuming. So that's good. That'll cause lots of gray hairs, I'm sure. So very good. Thanks for hopping on with that poll. Appreciate it. So data plus process and optimization. So kind of what we're looking at here are obviously kind of two kinds of windmills, right? The concept is pretty much the same for both of them. We're using wind to generate some power, and the fundamental concept's the same, but what's different between these pictures is that the underlying technology that's taking that process, that wind generation process, the underlying technology is improved substantially and is letting get a better outcome, more efficient use of that wind power, and be able to use it to capture and store that energy. So this is a great picture of how data and process kind of fit together to form optimal efficiencies, if you will, and then they get supported by technology, right, to make those things better. So a couple examples of that, thinking in terms of that model. So when you're on your monthly cycle, and maybe you're doing your collections report, or you're doing your project statuses for different construction projects, wouldn't it be nice if that data was getting automatically compiled for you so that you could spend time reviewing and making decisions on the data instead of spending your time collecting and collating? So that's really where technology can step in. It can help with the collation and the collection of that data, and it really gets it into a form where you can start to just really go into decision making and reviewing of the information instead of the time-consuming collection and collating of the information. So once that information has been put together and it's there in a form where we can start to act on it, we have a variety of tools and available now that can really bring the stakeholders together to look at that information. So really engaging the correct decision makers and stakeholders with that data in a timely manner so that they have, one, quick access to the information they need to make decisions. And if they need to, they can real easily collaborate on those decisions to move forward with whatever the decision or the issue is they're trying to get to or resolve. Another great area or optimization for thinking about how technology can support with some of these things within our data and our processes are triggers for letting me know when things are going wrong, right? So a lot of times we spend looking at reports, we're looking for things that are out of sorts. So we're looking for things that are out of the norm that we really want to be notified about so that we can take action on. And we can think of those as being triggers off of specific conditions. So an easy one would be looking at when my project budget maybe gets within 10 or my project spend gets within 10% of my project budget. So it'd be nice if I would alert it automatically so I can start to take actions to correct those particular situations. Those are a couple quick examples of technology supporting our data and our process, really to drive forward with an optimization. And that's really how we think of technology within Dean Dorton and within the data process optimization team. Technology, we really look at it as a supporting partner for the things that you've already figured out about your business, right? So we use technology to really augment and make better the things that you've defined for your processes, right? So technology is an enabler. It helps to enable that success. It doesn't necessarily fix your processes, because remember the old saying, if I have a bad process, what that's going to let me do if I automate it, it's just going to get me to a bad result or an incorrect result quicker, which nobody wants that. So we always kind of encourage our clients to think about the processes, think about the people involved in the processes. What are the strategies that you're using to differentiate your company? And then bring the technology layer in on top of that to help make those things maybe occur quicker, or to take out some of the busy work related in achieving those goals. Yeah, that's definitely a technology. Technology supports all those things for us. Very good. So my song is just about over here for the first part. We're going to transition a little bit over to Ed now. He's going to do a little bit of a dance with Power BI to start to talk about some of the things we can do with our data sources and pulling those things together to illustrate some of the points we've been talking about.
Thanks, John. I'm going to take over presentation here. We'll walk a little bit through what we're going to be doing. So what you're looking at right here is what a tool that we use a lot with data visualization, data aggregation, pulling things from different sources. You may have heard of it. It's called Power BI Desktop. So the tool we're walking through today, like I said, is just the desktop version. If you're interested in anything that we're going to be walking through, this is actually a free tool that's available. So you can go out, you could go to powerbi.com, you can download this tool, you can start using this with the data sources you have now just to get a feel for it. But what I thought I would do is talk about how we took this concept and we basically created a summary dashboard here. This one focuses a little more on project management, but we're going to walk through the pieces of how to build this in the Power BI desktop tool, just to give you an idea of how it works. So I'm showing the finished product here a little bit, just so you know where we're going. It's got some built-in filtering like this. We built out 3 panels here. We'll see how far we get in the demo. But if I look at my projects and I want to drill in on costs and see how my costs are laid out, overall status, and then we talked about bid history a little bit. So delving into some of those bids, maybe lost bids, not submitted, why weren't they submitted, what do the numbers look like, what do our won bids look like, things like that. So linking those data sources together into a cohesive model like that can help give us a view and help us make decisions based on the data coming in from our organization. To do that, we have tried to simulate what data would look like from disparate systems covering this. So both, project data where I have jobs, accounting data blended into those, revenue recognized, total job cost. What does my job costing look like? That's coming out of a system. My overall bids, my bid management might be something else. My safety system that's recording near misses, lost time, contractors, and then maybe liens on the job through those contractors. So kind of have a collection of data in this spreadsheet. A lot of the systems that we work with organizations on, especially in the small to mid-sized range, come out basically in this format. So they're coming out in what we'll call a comma delimited file or a CSV file that we'll then pick up and blend together into what we need to create from a data model perspective. So this isn't dissimilar from what you would see probably if you started this exercise in your own organization, or if you looked at a solution that's already in place in your own organization. Some larger systems do have direct connections that Power BI works with as well. It has hundreds of connectors. So sometimes we can get a little cleaner data. But for the purposes here, we're just going to walk through and show what we would see and what that process looks like when you're starting at this level where we're just basically have this in Excel or a comma delimited file here. So to do this real quick, I'm just going to switch to a wider monitor so you guys can see some of the data as we're putting it together. One moment to get that going. All right, so this is our base Power BI interface. When we pull it up, it's basically saying, hey, I can do all this stuff, but you got to add data. So I just want to walk through what that looks like. We're going to say get data, and we know this is an Excel. This is the Excel file that I just showed you, and you're going to see why it's similar in a moment. Nope. One catch, you do have to close the file because it does lock it during this process. So let me close that. It gets me every time. And you can see right away it's hit our Excel file. We've named our sheets, so it's pulled all these out. It wants to know which of these we want to pull into our Power BI data model. We're going to pick all of them here. But as you click through them, you can see this is the same data we had in the Excel sheet. What it's doing is it's recognizing which things are dates, which are text, which are numbers, and then it's looking for relationships among this data. So if I hit load here, you're going to see it go through a process where it's actually grabbing these files out. This same process exists, whether it's a simplified spreadsheet like this, or whether it's connecting to an external system, pulling hundreds of thousands or even millions of rows. It will still churn through that process, just like you saw. Now, the only thing different that you're going to see here is going to be over here on the right. I actually have my data in with my columns. But more importantly, Power BI has taken what I had in my spreadsheet and linked it together automatically, even though I didn't tell it how those disparate data sources link together. So there's connections in the data, connections that may have to be added for some sources, linking back to a job or whatever our master record is going to be. But once that information is populated, this tool basically covers 80 to 90% of those data connections and how that data exists in your organization, which will really help us once we start developing the visualizations. All right, so let's go into actually building the dashboard. I have some things in place on this file, so I'm going to switch over to this file here. Same pictures we just had. And what you'll notice is this correlates to basically what we just saw. I've just copied in the text here and the image, so we don't have to redo it. I was asked in the last webinar thing, if you're designing stuff, how hard is it to come up with something like this? And it's not very hard. We can insert shapes. So if you're doing this yourself, you can divide up your report with these kind of bars pretty easily. I just know these are sized appropriately for what we built before, so I'm just skipping ahead a little bit and saving us, about 5 minutes of design time there. So in Power BI, what we do is we interact with these visualizations over here, which for you are just going to look like squares if you haven't used this before. But these are our visualizations that are going to decide whether we want to show something as a bar chart, whether we want to show it as a table, pie chart, donut chart, so on and so forth. One of the more powerful parts of Power BI is being able to come up with numbers that key on KPIs. To do that, we actually use a visualization called a card, which is just as simple as it sounds. And if you remember the example, for our overall job prospects here, we had total revenue, we did gross profit and gross profit margin up top. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get these cards ready and just put these all the way across now so we don't have to build more later. Probably have to resize them once we get real data in here. So these are going to be containers that we're going to assign pieces of data to in the Power BI desktop tool. And then on the right, we had our safety and lien information that we'll pull over here, and we'll show you how to fill all these out. These are single digit numbers or lower numbers than revenue, hopefully. We want our revenue to be definitely higher than any safety incidents. Okay, so the first one we're going to go after here, let's get our total revenue up, which for us, we're going to be looking under job, and we have job revenue that's being aggregated over here. For all of these objects that we put on a Power BI dashboard, we have this visualizations column down the middle. Now, you're probably not going to be able to read all of the text in here. It gets pretty small, but it's basically, this is what allows you to pick the portions of your data that are affected by the visualization. The card is the simplest possible thing because we're just telling it what column and what table of the data should I be worried about and what should I do with it. So for this one, we're going to be looking at job, and we're going to job revenue. No, job revenue is hiding right there. I can do different things with this if I need to. So we want a sum on this, but I have the power to change what I'm doing, and we'll see a little bit of that later. So if I need to take a median job, if I need to look at standard deviations between similar sized jobs, if I just need a count, which is what we'll do for safety, min, max. So a lot of qualifiers we can put on that data. For this one, we're going to keep it pretty simple here. And can add titles if we need to. So again, lots of options in here to change. Just for the time we have here, we're not going to go into too much of this, but just know we can customize this to show whatever we want. So instead of sum of job revenue, this could say total revenue. So we're going to look at same thing here. We're going to do gross profit dollars, again aggregated by a sum. And then we also have this by percentage for this card. Over on the right, this is where we looked at safety and contractor status, such as outstanding lien waivers. So the first one we're going to look at, we'll do overall safety incident count, which comes from our safety system. And we already have that aggregated. We could certainly count that as well, but it's easier if it's already here. Oh, I made that its own card. And you click here and do that again. Safety incident count, and let's get our lost time count out here as well. And then this last one, we were using outstanding lien waivers. So for this one in particular, this one is not a count. Actually, we do have a count there, so that'll sum up. I can also do that by just doing a count on incident ID, which we'll see later as well. But with a few little bit of clicking there, we basically have our top overall summary. And now we're going to dive down into details. So for the details of everything we're doing in this, we're going to look at this at a table perspective. So we get to pick what columns we want in here, what we want them to look like, and we'll show a couple fancy formatting options that Power BI gives us that we can do very quickly to provide a little bit of quick impact to the organization and the consumers of this report, which will be important to get some momentum going on your data analytics journey. So most of the data we're going to put here, since we're looking at overall job budget, is going to be from job. You saw me drag earlier. I'm going to select these. They're going to populate this table in the order that I pick them. So you can always change that later, but if you know what you need right off the bat, it's a little bit quicker to do that. And again, we're seeing the trick that make sure you're highlighted on where you want to click. That'll get you every time too. So we're going to start with job name. We're going to look at what the job total amount was that was agreed upon. And then we're going to look at current recognized revenue, pull in costs as well. And then we're duplicating a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and look at our profit numbers and profit percent that we have currently out there as well. And we'll do a safety incident count for this last column. So for this last column, I'm going to pick the number of incident ideas that are associated with that, and then that's going to automatically default to count. So I can see where I have 0 incidents versus Kentucky Transportation Center, maybe a larger bid where I have 3 that I might want to look at a little more closely. So to get this a little more readable, we are going to do a quick touch on this. So let's take values up to, let's take that up to 16. And we'll take column, we'll do the same column headers. Make those about that. That gets us pretty big there. An example of renaming a column when we need to. It's going to shrink that up a little bit, but since this is pretty wide, we'll make these a little smaller for us. It looks like. So a lot of what you're doing in Power BI is making this work within the visualizations that you're operating under. For us, that means basically fitting it into this space we have here. So we can play with those if we want. Overall totals, we have totals up here, so we're going to take away. I'm just going to flip that off really quick. We can just take that total line off because if I'm clicking on any one of these, I'm going to see that up here anyway. So it links that drill down. Now, what we might want to see is if we look at one of these columns where we're interested, and if you saw in the example, we had these color coded. So Power BI has a concept of conditional formatting where we can go through a column and paint that column a different color based on the values in there. And at a basic level, that's really easy to do. And so we're going to do that let's do that for our profit margin here. Let's go through and we're going to say conditional formatting. We're going to change the background color. It pops us up a box. I always like to default to 3 colors. So for my low values, I'm going to pick somewhere in the red category. We'll go yellow. We'll leave it at that mustardy yellow for the middle, and then somewhere on the green spectrum for how we're doing at the top. So once we say, okay, I want to do these colors. I want to go low to high. You can also do this by certain percentages if you have your own KPIs that you want to mark colors off at. Same thing we do here. We just set the actual values here instead of letting it pick lowest, middle, high. So you can customize that if you want. For us, this is enough. And again, it adds that quick look of green, yellow, red. All of our negatives are hitting in the red zone right now, which is probably what we want. And but again, in 30 seconds there, we picked a column. We said, I want to look at this more visually, and we can make that change pretty quickly. All right. So that's kind of a quick look at how you would get to this overall look from the data we had. The full sample we have customizes this a little more. We turn this font white, for example, for readability. 100 different things you can do with a layout of this, but most of your time is going to be spent getting the data where you need it to be and creating the visualizations that you're looking at. We'll build out the cost one here as well. So for cost, we want to look at the different type of costs we have. In this data, we have costs split out by labor costs, material costs, and equipment costs. And we have that on a per project basis. So we want to look at, again, our top line might be our overall summary of those items and where that data sits. But we want to have that detail layer where we can quickly see what that's looking like on a project by project basis. And so we'll build those out here again. Everybody's used to the card, I think, by now. A smaller one. No, it's not going to be a smaller one. So resize it is. So let's get some cards up here for our overall totals that we're going to go with. We're going to do 4 this time. We'll do total cost, then we'll just do the split of the cost between labor, materials, and equipment. That should work for us. Okay. So these are all in costs table, which is going to obviously be coming from a different system, more than likely. So overall cost amount, we're going to drag here just so we can see overall cost amount is going to be 2.31 million. And then we have aggregations on top of that. That's going to show us our basis for equipment costs, material costs, and what we need for labor. So when we pull those in, let's do labor first. Pull labor there. You notice I'm adding these to cards a little differently in a couple different spots there. I didn't drag that one right. Just so you can see there's different ways to do this. It's pretty forgiving as long as the data itself is set up correctly. So across all of our projects, we don't have a huge equipment cost here, but definitely big enough where we're going to want to be looking at it. We can balance those out however we want. Now, when we start getting into data here, this is probably where most of the data is going to come. We want to look at this on a job basis. So I want to see how my costs are spread apart here. We'll do a little bit of formatting to this one as we go, just so you can see what that looks like. But we're just going to use a bar chart here. We're going to want the x-axis to be our job name. So we're going back to our job table here. And sorry, the y-axis. We want that vertically. So we're going to have the job name going up the left, and we're going to be looking at costs going on the x-axis. This visualization will stack a bar chart. So instead of just saying total cost, we can go ahead and bring these over as they're split up. So we can look at labor, materials, equipment in that order and watch them stack. So if I go to labor, materials, and equipment, we'll see those stack along that bar chart there. Nice and clean, pretty much right off the bat. There's a little bit of formatting we can do with where the labels here are in the title. But we can look at costs at projects pretty quickly here. We can already start to filter even though this visualization is not done. So if we want to just look at KY, Transportation Center, we'll just get the cost for that. Same thing here. So we can look at those one by one and aggregate up top, or we can delve into this becomes a detail pane if we start filtering. Another thing that we had on the original one, we added actually just a quick donut chart out here that broke out total cost by type. If we wanted to look at that a little differently, to do that, all we're going to do is we tell it what type of split do we want on that. For this, we want to split by a cost type, which is what we call our legend. And then in the values, again, we're just feeding it the entire cost amount as a sum. This will give us this look. We can go change this if we want. So sometimes those titles aren't the best. But visual, if we look at detail labels, what I always like to see is I like to see category and data value in there, which also usually lets us take the legend off and make that a little bigger. So again, this is full filtering. If I want to look at materials, it's going to show me what that material look. It's going to highlight that for every project and put that up here. If I look at labor, it's going to show me highlight the labor costs in every project. With few projects like this, it's not that big of an impact doing that, but with larger data sets, that becomes pretty powerful. All right, and then we'll build out the last page here, which is, again, a slightly different look from bids management, and we'll show you how to do that. So this one, we're just going to put a couple cards up top. I think everybody's used to cards by now, but we want to look at what our total bid aggregate has been, and then maybe average bid. So a couple different ways to look at that. You might want to fine tune that into average one, median one, variances, things like that. Obviously, if you have the data to do that, that's not overly difficult to do. But for this card, we're just going to come in and we're going to grab bid amounts, hiding up there. Which again, it got to highlight the card first. Bid amount will give us that. This one already has an aggregate created for average bid amount also. You probably can't read, but I can put in there pretty easily. That aggregate actually is going on something slightly different than the number we're doing. So there's a couple ways you can do it. For us, I forgot that we tried something new there. So we're going to put this card in actually the same way, just to show you the difference of what it really looks like. We're going to do the same bid amount, but instead of a sum, we're going to make this average. So we're going to actually calculate this from the data instead of pulling in a number that was from our larger system. So for the bids we're going to be looking at on this system, this is the correct average bid amount. Okay. Let's add another a chart down here just to let us look at how that splits up. And let's look at bid status here. So our legend is going to be bid status, like we talked about before. And then we're going to want to see this by bids won, lost, not submitted. To do this, we actually use an identifier for a table on a table like this, and then we just count it. So that's going to show us our picture here. We can change the formatting on that if we'd like I did before, but this is big enough where that probably works. So I can see I have 9 bids won, 42 of my bids have been won, 20 lost. About 15% we didn't submit for one reason or another, and then we have 23% or 5 bids pending. Whenever we do something like this, we usually do want to add in our detail table like we did on the other pages also. So if I add in if I add in my detail table and populate it right there, I can pull in what I want to see from bids. So probably be, bid name, bid status, and bid amount to start us off there. So, and again, when we click through these, if I click one, it's going to highlight my won bids here. If I click on lost, I'm going to see which ones I lost. If I want to see what's pending, it'll look. I can look at my total amount, average pending, and which bids are pending. All in a quick glance here once this data is connected up. So hopefully that makes sense. It's kind of a whirlwind intro. We built basically this whole sheet here in about 15 minutes. When you're doing this in your organization, you'll have to take into account some of the stuff John talked about earlier. So, what data sources do you focus on to build something like this? What's going to be most impactful? Go through a process of, do you have clean data? Do we need to scrub any data before we pull it out and get it into a presentation like this? But for the purposes of this demo, luckily we had all clean data, which always happens, right? And we were able to build out this quick look that might go, to a manager or the executive suite for review. Once this is created, we can set this to publish and update daily, a couple times a day if it needs to be, and then this sits out there for consumption. So with a little bit of work, you can create something pretty powerful here for insights into the data of your organization. So John, I want to let it go back to your deck here.
Should be coming over here. Let me try one more time. There we go.
Right. So a little bit of what I talked about just a second ago. So you guys, anybody on this call understands the data in their organization and what drives the organization. Start from that perspective. Where are there gaps? What's written on the sheet that are keeping you up at night? Start with that business problem, and then we work backwards to figure out where to capture the data sources, and the other data assets that we need to help solve those problems. That's a really big step. We don't want to just go into this process and build a dashboard, build some kind of data aggregation, a visualization tool like this, just to be doing it. We have to figure out what questions it's going to answer, what part of life is it going to make easier. Expert services, once you understand that, an organization like us can come in and help you speed up that process of getting the data ready, cleansing the data, creating the data model that's going to work for the questions that you need answered, helping with visualizations, what we've seen across industry, things like that. And then we plan that out, budget, timeline, resources. A lot of times when we're helping organizations out with projects like this, we'll have people from the organization on our team working through it. So whether that's checkpoints to review deliverables in progress, or whether that's really working with us to understand the business so that we can help give insights that maybe weren't there before. There's a few different hybrid models we do with that, but always great to plan it out, figure out the timeline, figure out our resources and budget to do something like that. And I think that takes us about to the end here. Thanks everybody for participating and joining us. We do have a personalized evaluation for anybody that is on this webinar. So we can do, we basically do a 2-hour session and talk about your process goals, your data goals, where you're currently at, possibly where you're getting stuck, and come up with a quick list of recommendations and steps that may make sense to walk towards. So that is a free, no obligation session that John and I participate in if you're interested.
And then here's Ed's contact info and my contact info. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, we'd love to hear from you. That would be outstanding. And then Judy put a link to our webinar evaluation form. It's in the chat. Here's a QR code if you prefer to scan that while you're here on the thing to fill that out. We'd appreciate any feedback you can give. It'll be super helpful for us going forward with other webinars such as this. And with that, I'll back up one slide here. Didn't see a lot of questions come in, but does anyone have any questions as we're winding down here that you'd like to throw out? We'd love to hear from you. Okay. All right, very good. Well, if you think of anything, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to fill out the webinar evaluation form. We would really appreciate it. And have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thanks for attending.